People always imagine the moment of family breaks as something loud, a slammed door, a funeral argument, lawyers. In my case, it was a toast at an Italian restaurant with cloth napkins and dim lighting that tried too hard to feel expensive. I remember the sound more than the words at first. Forks against plates, ice shifting inside glasses, my sister Rachel tapping her spoon lightly against a wine glass to get everyone's attention. She stood smiling beside the table, cheeks flushed from attention and birthday cocktails. "To my brother," she announced, lifting her glass toward me, "the family ATM." Everyone laughed automatically, even me for half a second. Then she added, "May he one day find a life." More laughter. Not vicious laughter. That's the important part. Comfortable laughter. The kind people use when a joke has been rehearsed socially for years. I looked around the table afterward. My mother smiling into her napkin. My uncle shaking his head like Rachel was too much. My father staring at his plate with the expression he always wore when silence benefited him more than intervention. Nobody looked surprised, which meant nobody thought it was unfair. I took a sip of water before answering, calmly enough that Rachel kept smiling. "To the birthday girl," I said, raising my own glass slightly, "who just lost her lease, her car payment, and next month's tuition." The table went still, not dramatically, just abruptly enough that the restaurant noise around us became visible again. Rachel blinked once. "What?" I set my fork beside my plate carefully, undone covering them. Nobody spoke. My mother's face changed, first not anger. Recognition. Because unlike the others, she actually knew how much of Rachel's life I had been quietly financing. The apartment cosign, the automatic car draft tied to my account, the tuition gap every semester Rachel called temporary. I stood up, folded my napkin onto the table, and left cash beside my untouched entree. Nobody followed me outside. That part always mattered to me later. For a few full minutes, nobody moved. The calls started before I reached my car. Rachel first, then my father, then my mother. By midnight, there were 42 missed calls and 6 voicemails ranging from furious to disoriented. I didn't answer any of them, not because I wanted revenge, mostly because I had finally realized something embarrassing. I had spent years paying to avoid difficult emotional conversations. Money kept everything smooth. Money prevented accountability from fully landing anywhere. As long as I covered the next emergency, nobody had to examine the structure underneath it, including me. The next morning, Rachel sent a text long enough to require scrolling. Some of it angry, some pleading, some insulting. One line stayed with me though: "You can't drop this on me overnight." What I never replied was this: it hadn't been overnight for me. It had been 11 years. People assume financial support inside families is discussed openly. Usually it isn't. It happens quietly. A transfer during lunch break. A signature on a refinance form. A phone call that starts with, "I hate asking, but..." Then eventually the support becomes invisible even to the people receiving it, especially to them. 3 days after the dinner, Rachel's landlord called me directly. Professional voice. Routine question. Was I still willing to remain guarantor on the lease renewal? No, I said. There was no confrontation attached to it. No speech. The woman simply thanked me and updated the file. Later that afternoon, Rachel called 17 times. Not because she was homeless, not because anyone threw her out. Because for the first time, institutional systems were speaking to her instead of through me. The university placed a registration hold on her account after the unpaid balance remained unresolved. The bank declined the car payment draft because I had removed my linked account authorization. None of it was dramatic. That was the strange part. No villain appeared, no punishment scene unfolded, just forms, policies, deadlines, reality without cushioning. Months passed before Rachel and I spoke in person again. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments on a gray Saturday morning that felt more like an appointment than reconciliation. She looked older to me, not physically, structurally, like somebody who had spent months discovering how many invisible things adulthood actually required. We talked carefully at first. Surface-level updates. Work. Mom's blood pressure. Our father pretending nothing had happened. Then silence settled between us. Rachel stirred her coffee for a long time before speaking again. "I really didn't think you minded," she said quietly. Not defensive, not manipulative, just honest in a way that almost hurt worse. Because I realized she was telling the truth. I had hidden my resentment so professionally that eventually everyone, including me, mistook it for generosity without limits. She paid for her own drink before leaving. I noticed that. Not because I needed the $6. Because she noticed it too. When she stood to go, she hesitated, like she wanted to say something larger. An apology maybe. Gratitude. Anger. Instead, she just nodded once and left. I watched her walk out through the glass doors, carrying a life that finally belonged entirely to her. Then I sat there a while longer, staring at my untouched coffee, realizing how easy it is to confuse being needed with being loved.